Lori again, and today I'm going to say welcome back to our homestead and to Miller Meadows. We have a bunch of daylilies that are just beginning to bloom, and I wanted to share something with you today. If you were not aware, daylilies are a pretty common type flower that you can find along roadside ditches, on old homesteads, and if you're not aware, most of this plant is actually edible. The flowers are edible. You can fry these. The tubers or roots are edible. You can boil those up like potatoes. But today what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be harvesting the non-bloomed flower blossoms or flower pods. I learned this wonderful recipe from Amber May in Snug for pickled daylily pods. And so what I do is I look for very tight, unopened flower pods, just like this, and just snap them right off your plant at the base. That's what you're looking for, are these nice, tight flower buds. And you can take the large ones, the small ones, just make sure that they are not opened in any way. So here's a little bit more of an immature one. I'm going to go ahead and take that one too. I've got some larger ones up over here. Well, now see this one? This one, you can already tell that this is ready to blossom. This is too far gone. So, but this one is a pretty good one right here. It's nice and tight yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and harvest a bunch of these unopened flower pods. And then I am going to meet you back in the kitchen and I will show you how I pickle these.
Sadie. Sadie. Sadie.
There you are. All right, guys, so I am back in the kitchen after harvesting my foraged daylily flower pods. And I do want to just touch base on a couple of things before I continue on with the recipe. And one of the most important things that I want to discuss is identifying your lily correctly, okay? The lilies that I am talking about today are common daylilies. They have a base where all of your leaves shoot out in kind of a spray pattern, okay? And of course, you know, the lily itself, the variety that I have, the variety of daylily, is an orange and yellow flower. Now, there are different types of daylilies, and they are all in the same family. Once you properly identify a daylily, all daylilies are edible. I'm going to set this down and just get it out of my way. But they have to belong to the family of Hemerocallis fulva, all right? Hemerocallis fulva. Now, belonging to that family of daylilies, your daylily should be edible. But I do want to give you a very, very important warning. Not all lilies are edible. Easter lilies, if you eat an Easter lily, you will die. King's turbine lilies are also toxic. Most of the decorative lilies that you can buy to plant in your flower garden are actually non-edible type lilies, okay? So I am only speaking of the daylily family, all right? So it's super, super important that you absolutely identify this plant meticulously, okay? And please look in books, go on the internet, however you want to do your search engines or whatever. I want you to really just look into this and make sure that you are identifying the right plant. Now, I know that it's something that you hear about all over the place and all the time, but it bears repeating. Please, when you are wild harvesting anything, be aware and be familiar with where you are harvesting. When I said that these grow in ditches along roads, when I was saying that, I didn't mean
go next to this heavily traveled highway where all of the exhaust from the cars are contaminating the flowers you might be harvesting, or where the county or state comes along and sprays poisons along our roads. I'm talking back dirt roads or lesser traveled places where you know they are not spraying and they're not going to be contaminated with things. Now, I was harvesting just right here on our own property and in our front yard. We don't use any chemicals or sprays or poisons of any kind, so I know that that is not a concern for me. But I do want you, each and every one of you, to be aware of that and to think about that whenever you're outdoors and harvesting wild edible plants. Please always keep that in your mind. Has spray been here? Has poison been here? Is this a high traffic area? Or even animals, pets and animals. You know, if you have a dog or cats that like to urinate and relieve themselves, be aware that, you know, those are things that happen. So make sure that you're harvesting in clean areas. Now, I want to specify too, I made a few notes here. I want to specify too that most of your non-edible type lily varieties actually have a bulb, okay? When you plant them, they're actually kind of a single solitary bulb, all right? The daylily varieties are what they call tubers. And these tuber roots kind of reach out all over the place, and they have these long, narrow, thicker places. Those are the tubers. They're almost like a little fingerling potato, okay? So that's another way of identifying if you have the right type of lily. Now, these daylilies are actually considered an invasive species across most of the United States, all right? But if you are going to harvest the tubers, I do ask you, you know, be conservative in your harvesting, because we don't want to just go out there and destroy these wonderful species that we want to continue to go back and harvest year after year. So please do be, I guess, conservative in your harvesting if you're going to dig up the tubers or the roots. These do spread very easily by the tubers in the ground, but you just never want to over harvest anything. And we as responsible people just need to always keep that in mind, okay? Don't take all of what you find. Always leave it so that it can propagate more. So I just wanted to touch on that. So there's a difference between the poisonous lilies, which are usually a bulb, and the edible lilies are usually tubers, okay? But again, please research this on your own. I am not an expert. I just know my variety is a variety that I can consume and my family can consume. But those are just really important things for you to find out on your own. And another thing to know is that certain people do actually have allergies with these lilies, with these edible lilies. And so just like any other wild forage good that you would go and harvest, you always want to experiment in little tiny tastes and you know, little bits of eating. Don't go hog wild on these things the first time you eat them and eat half a jar, okay? If you don't know whether you're allergic to them or not, you really don't want to consume a whole lot of them until you know for sure that, hey, this sat okay with me. Now, one of the main signs of having an allergy to lilies is you will be nauseated afterwards. And nobody really enjoys going through that either. So just be conservative. When your first time eating these, just try a little bit at first, okay? Because I don't want anybody sick and I don't want anybody having a terrible allergic reaction. So be aware that some people, now I think it's less than 5% of the population are actually allergic to these daylilies, but that still leaves 5% of the population that could possibly be allergic to these things. So please be conservative when you're just trying something new like this, and especially with a wild foraged food. Just start slow, okay? All right, so I am going to take all of my wonderful lily flower pods and I'm gonna get them to the sink, and I'm just simply gonna rinse them off in a colander with a little bit of fresh, cool water, just to make sure that there isn't any dust or dirt particles on them before I get started on the recipe. So I'll get these washed up and be back in just a few minutes. All right, so I got my Daylily flower pods rinsed off in the sink, and let's start the recipe. Now, Daylily pods actually can be eaten raw, okay? You can just munch these things right down. They're delicious. They're fresh. I don't know, they taste a little bit like a green bean, but they have almost a little bit of a spicy end, okay? You can also fry these in butter and serve them as a side dish, like asparagus or green beans for your meals. And the actual bloomed flowers, those make beautiful additions to salads. Now, the bloomed flowers don't have as much flavor, but they add a beautiful splash of color in fresh summer lettuce salads. So those are all the ways that I personally use the buds and the flowers. Now, the flowers, like I said, the fully bloomed flowers can be battered and fried also, kind of as a fritter type thing. I've never done that personally. I haven't tried that yet personally, but we do eat these fresh, and we have had them fried. And after I found Amber's recipe for these pickled flower pods last year, excuse me, I've just got to check and see what's going on here on my stove. I better turn things down just a little bit while I'm yickety-yakketing at ya. Anyway, after I found Amber's recipe for pickled flower pods last year, I tried them and absolutely love them. And so I figured that this year I would share this recipe with you. Now, there's a whole lot of other recipes for wild foraging that Amber has shared in the Snug group. That's SNUG, Canning to Preserve Our Future, on Facebook. She has amazing wild foraging recipes. Things that, you know, even though I and my family have always done wild foraging, as far as like mushrooms and things like that are concerned, Amber has just really helped me expand my knowledge in that area. So again, we invite you to come to Facebook and find the Snug group and join our canning family there. She has amazing wild foraging recipes, just like the one that I'm going to share with you today. So I am going to change things a bit, like I always do, all right? I try things the way that they are written for the first time, and then I start kind of tweaking and changing things to my own personal preference. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to read you Amber's ingredients and directions as she has written them. So this is spicy pickled daylilies and daisies, okay? The ingredients are 4 cups of daylily flower buds, just like I've shown you, 1 cup of daisy flowers, which is optional. Now, I don't have daisies growing on my place. I've tried starting them a few years in a row. It always gets too dry. I forget to water them, and so they never get to seed out and get established. So I don't have daisy flower heads. So I am just opting out of the daisy flower heads, but it really does make a really neat presentation in your finished jar to have those daisy flower heads in there also. But anyway, 1 cup of daisy flowers, optional. 3 cups of white vinegar, 1 cup of water, 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 8 cinnamon sticks, 1/2 inch a piece, all right? So for a single recipe, you can take a full cinnamon stick and just bust those into 1/2 inch pieces, and you want 8 of those pieces per recipe, and 8 whole cloves. Now her directions, and we're not going to type those all out, I'll just talk to you about them. Her directions are to combine the vinegar, brown sugar, salt, cinnamon sticks, and cloves in a pan and bring it to a boil. Boil for 1 minute and then simmer for 5 minutes. And the reason why you want to do that is you want those cinnamon and clove pieces to really release the flavor into that pickling brine, okay? Place daylily buds and daisies into the pot and bring it to a boil, cover and simmer for 15 minutes, and then drain. So in other words, you would fish out all of your flowers from that brine, okay? Sorry, I still have Daylily flower bud in my mouth. Excuse me while I sit here and pick my teeth, guys. Anyway, place the daylily buds and daisies into the pot, bring to a boil, cover and simmer for 15 minutes, and then drain them. Fill your sterilized jars, leaving 1-inch headspace. Pack in tight, but don't bruise the flowers. Pour the brine over the buds and the flowers, distributing the cloves and the cinnamon equally through your jars. Check for air pockets using a non-metallic tool. Wipe your rims and screw on the lids and water bath for 10 minutes. Excuse me while I go and see what the dog is barking at. I will be back in just 1 minute. All right, Sadie was barking at a whole lot of nothing, which doesn't surprise me. But anyway, so I'm going to get on with what I have done to change this recipe just a little bit. And I haven't changed any of the ingredients, okay? So a lot of times I'll tweak like brines or recipes to my taste. And this brine, it's a sweet pickle brine, and it is a little bit spicy because you have the cinnamon and the cloves in there. And I found that balance absolutely fantastic. But last year when I made these for the first time, in that boiling process where you put your flower buds into the hot brine and you simmer them for 15 minutes, I really found that the flower heads just busted open and started really wilting and getting very soft. And I wasn't exactly pleased with that. And looking at the pickling brine, now this pickling brine, number one, is very high in vinegar, all right? We have like a 3-to-1 ratio of vinegar and water. So number one, that makes it extremely safe. And you have the addition, did I say 3/4 cup brown sugar? I hope I said that on the recipe. If I didn't, there's also 3/4 cup brown sugar in this recipe. And so that's what makes it a sweet pickle. My apologies if I missed that, but you know, I'm thinking back and I don't think that I did say that. There is 3/4 cup of brown sugar in this recipe. But anyway, so with the vinegar ratio, with the added sugar, this is a prime candidate for what we call open kettle canning. Now, open kettle canning, once again, and I know some of you have already heard this before, but redundant, repeated, you know, I don't know, whatever. I just really feel like I need to repeat this every single time so that if somebody new comes and watches my videos, they're not just thinking that they can do this with everything. I want everybody to know exactly what is safe and okay to open kettle can. Now, open kettle canning is a method of canning where you take a hot food item, a hot sanitized jar, a hot lid and ring, and you're just done. There is no further process in a hot water bath or a pressure canner or a steam canner, okay? And what I found out last year when I made these is I tried them open kettle canned, and I was a lot happier with the final product because the flower buds didn't burst open and they didn't get quite as soft. So I'm sharing with you today just the changed method, not the changed recipe, but the changed method where I have canned these and been extremely happy with them. All right, so open kettle canning can only be done with certain food items. And those food items are things very high in acid, like pickles with at least a 50-50 ratio, 50% vinegar, 50% water or higher, or if they're extremely high in sugar, like your jams and your jellies, where you have about 4 cups of fruit and 6 to 8 cups of sugar, okay? Those items are very safe to open kettle can. But one of the most important things that I can stress to you is you must have a sanitized jar. Unlike when you are canning other things in a hot water bath or a pressure canner, this really requires a sanitized jar, okay? Because you're not processing these any further in a hot water bath or a pressure canner. You're just putting your hot food product into the jar and you're done. So I will stress again, even though it really gets boring, a hot sanitized jar, a hot food product, which we're going to have boiling hot brine, okay? And a hot lid and ring. So I have prepared my jars, my brine, and my lids and rings. I've got my lids and rings nice and hot here. I have my jars that have been boiling for over 10 minutes in just one of my canner bases. And I have been cooking my brine, and you can see that it's boiling and hot. So what we are going to do is we are just going to take one of these hot sanitized jars, and we are going to start packing. Let's see if I get you down there far enough. There we go. We are going to start packing our flower buds into these jars. And yeah, this jar is really hot. And yeah, you want to try to work as quickly as you can. Just know that once in a while, while you're packing your jars, your jar might cool off a bit. In open kettle canning, it really is imperative and important to have everything good and hot in order to be successful, okay? You don't want these jars to fail on the shelf, and you definitely don't want them to come unsealed. So it's super, super important to just have everything very, very hot and sanitized. Of course, your flowers aren't sanitized, but they are going to be sanitized in that vinegar brine solution that you're going to be pouring over them. And what I do is I pack my flower heads in here just as tightly as I possibly can, working as quickly as I can. Like I said, ouch, that's hot. Like I said, sometimes you are going to have your jar cool off just a little bit, but as long as you have super hot brine and hot lids and rings, you're going to be absolutely fine. All right, so I'm just going to keep packing away and stop my yickety yakketing and concentrate on what I'm doing here. All right, so I've got that jar good and full. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my boiling hot brine over the top of those flowers. And my jar is still nice and hot, so I can just pour it right in. And we're going to make sure that the fluid level comes up to the very top of those stems. Now go ahead and get some of those cinnamon pieces and some of those cloves into each jar, okay? I'm going to turn this down, turn this down. And that vinegar is going to choke you up. Oh, that smells so delicious. All right, and then what we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and wipe the rim of that jar. Now make sure none of your flowers are kind of trying to poke out underneath your, or over the rim of your jar, because you don't want any of those flower stems interfering with the seal on this jar. And they do like to float, okay? They're full of air and they're raw. They're going to float. So you get that hot lid and ring, and you screw it on just a little bit more than fingertip tight, and you're done. You allow that to sit. It will seal as it cools. All right, so I'm going to get some more flowers just kind of straightened out here so that I can maybe pack a little bit more efficiently. Get them all at least heading in the right direction before I do another jar here. Okay, hopefully you can see what's going on there. All right, so I am going to grab another hot sanitized jar out of my canner, and I'm going to get these Daylily buds packed in as quickly as possible. Now, if you are going to add the daisy flowers, you would just shove a couple of daisy flowers down kind of towards the outside of your jar so that you can see them as a decorative element to your pickles. Like I said, I do not have daisies, so I'm just not adding that element to my jar. I'm going to kind of squish and settle with my fingers and see if I can't fit a few more in. Another thing I'm going to mention to you is that I have made triple amount of brine today because I figured I was going to have 2 or 3 at least pint-sized jars. The amount of brine that Amber has in her recipe should do 2 half pints or 1 full pint of pickled Daylily flower pod pickles for you. So I knew I had a little bit more flowers today, and I just wanted to get them all canned up, and so I tripled my recipe, my brine. All right, so we've got those all in the jar, and we are going to get that brine in there and a few of the little cinnamon and clove pieces along with it. Working as quickly as you can so that everything is nice and hot. You can bring this to 1/2 inch headspace, all right? Even 1/4 inch headspace is fine. Since you're open kettle canning, you're not going to have any of that overflow issue. Just make sure that everything is down in the brine and nothing is in the way of your seal from happening. Get that hot lid and ring, a little bit more than fingertip tight, and you are ready to go. Allow that to cool and seal. It's pretty good getting those flowers straightened out. I think I'm going to do that for this last jar too. We have our hot sanitized jar, all of our flower pods. See if I can stick that whole mass in there. The tighter you can get these packed, the better, just like with any other canning project. They are going to shrink a little bit just in that hot brine. They kind of get cooked. All right. Where did I put that? Oh, there it is. And there the dog goes barking. I think she's barking at me and the different inflections in my voice than normal. I'm normally pretty quiet around the house, so when I'm talking to the camera, she gets, I don't know, fired up. All right, so there we are. We have our last jar filled. I don't have enough flower buds left for another jar, so I'm just going to fry those up for our supper tonight, and we will each enjoy just a little taste of fresh daylilies. Hot lid and ring, a little bit more than finger tight, and we are done. Alrighty. So now I am going to run and get my can opener because I have my Daylily pickles from last year. As you can see, July of 22. Here we are in July of 23. And I am going to open these up for you so that you can see what the finished product is like. So let me run and get a can opener. Now, one last thing that I do also want to tell you is I made a little bit too much brine. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open kettle can this brine and just leave it on my counter so that in the next few days when I harvest more of these wonderful flower buds, I can just reheat my brine. So it is absolutely safe to open kettle can in the same method that we did for our flowers. A hot sanitized jar, hot lid and ring, hot boiling brine, and just cap it up and save it for the next time that you have more flower buds available to you to go ahead and get them canned up. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pop open this jar from last year of Daylily pod flowers, and I will show you how wonderful they are. Now, I said that I really prefer to open kettle can because the flowers don't explode open. They just stay more in a spear, okay? So, let's get you up here. All right. So I have my Daylily pickle. Now these are not really a crispy pickle, but they're very unique and fun. Hopefully I'm on camera here. Yeah, here we go. Daylily pod flour. So unique and fun. The tart from the vinegar, the sweet from the sugar, the zip of the cinnamon and the cloves, plus the flour itself has a little bit of a zip to it too. It's kind of got this spicy end to it. I really love these things. These are really wonderful as a garnish or just as a condiment on your table. It's unique, it's fun, it's not something that a lot of people are even familiar with. So I hope that you will give it a try in your home. Make sure you're using the right type of lilies though before you do this. Do your research and know that you have the right species of flowers, okay? Anyway, thank you so much for spending your time with me again today. God bless you all and happy canning, everybody.